Hello and welcome to this month's COVE Ocean Connector. I'm Bruce MacDougall. I'm a Senior Project Manager at COVE. Ocean connectors are an important part of what we do at COVE and are where the ocean tech community comes together, makes new connections, learns about new technologies, and comes up with new ideas. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for today's Ocean Connector, which is a panel discussion addressing the broad topic of marine electrification. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our Ocean Connector sponsors, Cox and Palmer. So welcome to our panelists. We have three panelists today. Our first panelist is Dr. Sue Malloy, President of Glass Ocean. Hello, Sue. Sue is a naval architect, an engineer, and an entrepreneur with a great deal of experience in ship propulsion, electric vessels, and renewable energy. So welcome, Sue. Our second panelist is Trevor Henniger, the COO of Remote. Trevor has previously helped develop and integrate renewable energy projects into the Nova Scotia electricity grid. He's also very familiar with the region startup community through his work as an associate at the very well-known and well-respected Atlantic Canadian branch of the Creative Destruction Labs. So Trevor, thank you for joining us today. And our third panelist is Kamen Stoikov-Penev from VARD Electro Canada. Kamen is the Director of Business Development for VARD and has a wealth of knowledge and experience regarding marine electrification. For those of you who don't know, VARD is a large company. It has offices in Vancouver, Ottawa, and Houston, and is part of the Fincantieri group, which is one of the world's largest shipbuilding firms. So thank you very much for being with us today, Kamen. So again, thank you for our panelists, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We'll certainly be able to address the topic of marine electrification from very diverse technical and business perspectives. So I'm looking forward to this. And I'd also like to say I wish we could be holding this event in person, and I'm very hopeful that we will soon be able to resume in-person Ocean Connector sessions. So before we start the discussion, just a few comments. So it's very clear that marine electrification has often been discussed in terms, and is most commonly discussed in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And this is certainly the primary concern, the primary driver for it. It allows vessels to be in a position to meet with future regulatory and environmental requirements, particularly for coastal operations. However, electrification is also becoming a technology that is being adopted for economic and operational reasons. And as a result of this, dockside charging is now becoming a hot topic with regulatory and standards-based developments on the near-term horizon. And I believe our panelists will have more to say about these topics, so I'm very much looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Another item is the advent of lithium-based energy storage systems, also very significant, but brings with it a number of technical challenges relating to operational cycles, safety, vessel classification, certification. So this is another critical component, and I believe our panelists will, I see some smiles here, so I believe our panelists will be saying a few things about that. So there you go. We hear a lot about electrification of automobiles, and while you can draw parallels, marine electrification is applied in an environment where there are many more types and sizes of vehicles and many different operational profiles. So this makes the technology and the business models more complex, and certainly has longer development cycles. Last year, I had the pleasure of participating in a marine electrification study that was conducted at COVE, and in almost all cases, the non-ocean transiting vessel design projects that we became aware of included design elements to allow for future electrification. And I think this is significant. And I think once again, our panelists will have a lot to add to this discussion. So I will now stop talking and allow our panelists to speak. And I think I will ask Sue Malloy to begin. Sue, my question to you is, what do you see for the future for Atlantic Canada and for Nova Scotia in particular? I'm thinking of fishing fleets, rural harbors, short distance ferries, coastal workboats. I almost said work boots. What role does the government play? What should the government play in this, both from a regulatory and a funding perspective? So I'm happy to hear what you have to say, and I'd be happy to hear if you have anything to say about what I started off with. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. So I think that the most important thing to think about here is we have an opportunity to leapfrog with technology. So, when we went to places around the world, developing nations that didn't have infrastructure for phones, we brought cell phones to them, and then they didn't need to get all the cables and wires everywhere, right? So that's kind of what we want to think about when we think about electrification in the marine space. We have not, as a wider society, regulated the smaller vessels. All the regulations tend to be for 400 tons plus. So we have an opportunity to take these vessels to better than they would have been had they been regulated for the last 25 years, like the shipping world. Like when Common speaks, his world in the larger ships is a very different set of regulations to it. So the emissions that come from these vessels are coming from engines that have no catalytic converters, they have no filtration. A lot of them can be old engines, and there has never been any driver for this industry to improve their emissions. And there's never been any regulatory piece to really take this further. So there's no blame on the industry, because it would be like blaming everybody for not having a catalytic converter in your car if there was no actual regulation to have it. We all have them because we're supposed to have them. So we have an opportunity with electrification to disconnect the power production from the propulsion system. So right now, when we have a propulsion system on a vessel, we have the propeller tends to be directly connected to the engine. So as soon as we disconnect that from the engine, so we have an electric motor and it connects to a power source, that's where we get the opportunity. So we really need to do that disconnect first, and then we can put in fuel cells, we can put in batteries, lithium-ion batteries, we can put in hydrogen, we can put in methanol, we can put in biodiesel. There's all of these other things that we can do. We can combine them together to get a really great opportunity there, like 70%, 80% reduction in emissions. We are at the point where these are all possible. But because I would say this industry has been a little neglected, and the opportunity is so big, and I also believe from the emissions that we've been counting that they've been missed in the national calculations. So we have the evidence. We know what these boats are producing, and there is a lot of carbon. There's a lot of hydrocarbons, NOx, SOx. Well, not SOx, not so much, because that's change at the fuel source, but all these emissions are being produced. They're not being collected into our budget. So if we do that, we start to see that the numbers would be significant. And by driving the industry through tax breaks, what I would like to see is the government right now has a tax opportunity. If you buy a new delivery truck, suppose you're a catering company and you buy a new truck to deliver your product, and that truck is electric, you can depreciate the entire value of that vehicle in the first year. If we could have those tools that already exist be applied to the marine sector, then that would be a huge opportunity. So the different thinking is these vessels are designed to last for 25, 35 years. So we're not talking about new all the time. Often the times, sometimes it'll be new, but sometimes it'll be retrofit. So we need to look at the industry properly, and that's a tax opportunity. Then there's subsidies that come for the first few years to help this move along. That's what we need from an industry. We need to treat it just like we would treat any other business. Is that we want them to change, but there's a bigger change required because there have been no demands on them up to this point. So that's where I'll stop there.
Interesting. Thank you, Sue. I heard you say, I believe that sometimes GHG emissions are not properly counted in the marine environment. Was I correct in saying that? Did you?
Yes. So
because it depends on jurisdictions.
Well, no. What I have spent a lot of time speaking with the Department of Energy, Department of Environments in countries around the world. I've been on trade missions and met with a lot of ministries of environment, and I know that when you count the emissions, there's either, if they do even connect them, it's just one blanket number, maybe to do with fuel estimations. But I've been to island nations in the Caribbean, and they've told me they've done environmental calculations and they know the CO2 of their island, and then I'll ask them, have they included all the tour boats and the fishing boats and the recreational boats? And they'll look at me and their jaws will drop. They'll be like, I didn't even think of them. So the ocean, for that kind of work, and this is why this has happened, it's out of sight, out of mind. You know, we can't see it on a daily basis. It's not an impact on your quality of life. Like when we see smoke coming out of cars, and this is really important to understand as well, is car smoke comes out at the same height as kid strollers, and you know, people who are breathing way more oxygen per second than adults, right? So we see that and we think, oh my God, that's really awful, we got to fix that. So we don't see anything with the ocean. You see a little bit in the morning when they're warming up, and you see the smoke coming out of the stern, and that, or you know, wherever the exhaust is, and then they're gone. So they're not calculated. I don't believe anyone can tell me that they're calculated.
Thank you, Sue. I'm gonna move on to Trevor. Trevor, can you share with us your thoughts on the regulatory environment for marine electrification, where it needs to be, and also in terms of a value proposition? Do you see a current and a future? What does the value proposition for marine electrification look like? And also, is data important? And there's, you know, all kinds of things around grid availability for power and high power requirements for vessel ESS for charging systems. And I'd like to hear your perspectives and perhaps how that applies to your company. So go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. You know, I think you know, just to kind of unpack those one at a time. You know, I think on the regulation side, certainly we're more familiar, you know, not as familiar with the large vessels, although getting into that space. So some of my comments will be, you know, more geared towards the fishing industry and the harbor craft and that type of vessel. You know, I think probably not speaking anything that the other panelists don't know as well, but generally I'd say that the existing regulations and standards have evolved over the years without you know, full electrification or mostly electrification being part of the mix. So you know, it's natural that they are somewhat cumbersome and aren't quite what we need to see this move. You know, you see you know, markets as usual, you know, in Europe and other places are keeping pace much faster with this than we are here. You know, I think that you know, if you look at the land side, and I know they're not a direct comparison, but you know, regulations are not playing a huge role in slowing down the electrification of land vehicles. And you know, I think that generally you know, we need to make sure that the current regulations here don't you know, don't hamper the rate of adoption and the demand for this. And in terms of future regulations, you know, I think you know, leveraging you know, work that's already been done, I think is going to be critical, and you know, not trying to reinvent the wheel where it doesn't need to be reinvented. You know, organizations like DMV and Lloyd's and others have done great work to, you know, be able to validate claims and bring additional certifications for the space. And you know, my hope would be that government is going to be leveraging those to make sure that they don't delay this adoption curve that's coming. And you know, that's on the basis that, you know, a lot of time, you know, electrification technology by far and large has been proven safe already. You know, it's well studied that you know, the fire risk from batteries is far less than combustion equivalents. You know, and from you know, that's just one example. And you know, we really think that you know, the Canadian regulations just need to make sure we adopt what's already been done, and only make new regulation for things that are unique to Canada. So you know, the key thing for us, you know, as a company that's building software, and we want to apply that software to a variety of vessels and technologies, is that you know, from a regulatory perspective, that you know, that it's done in a way that doesn't slow down adoption. You know, if people want an electric vessel, they should be able to go get one, and they should be able to you know, get it in the water, and they should be able to operate it. and the hope is that regulation can keep pace with that. So. So that's, it's a little bit on regulation. I can jump into the value proposition side if you'd like. I think from a value proposition perspective, our belief continues to be that anything that's sub 2 day at sea, or doesn't have a very, very large shipboard power requirement, is a good candidate for full electrification. So and beyond that, you're into hybrid, and whether that's hybrid of battery and diesel, or battery and hydrogen, or battery and ammonia, that's TBD. But generally, anything that's that sub 2 day market, we believe is a candidate for full electrification based on financial side of things. We believe that total cost of ownership for those vessels will be lower, and which is why we're excited to play in that space. I think as battery technology evolves, the battery technology today, enables that. I think as we see battery technology continue to evolve, and it evolves very quickly, and just as an example, the battery costs have dropped 90% over the last decade or so, and will continue to drop, is what the expectation is. And as the technology and the power density gets better, as the volume density of batteries gets better, as the safety improves even further, we believe that batteries will push the boundary on that 2 day limit. So we think that anything under that 2 day mark, there's no reason why it can't go, fully electric or nearly fully electric.
Trevor, I heard you say that there's plenty of experience, European experience and Baltic experience with regard to regulatory environments, and that Canada should follow the lead, or follow what's been done there, and only regulate things that are specific to Canada. And I think that's I've heard others say that as well. I think that's a very interesting perspective on what's going on there. So that's a great comment, I think. I'm going to move on to Common. Common, your company is involved in a large scale project that I understand has a very specific operation profile, and it's actually, we've discussed it, and it sounds like a very interesting thing. And I want to let you talk about it. Can you tell us about it, and can you talk about where you think electrification will be? And I think your perspective is one from a large vessel perspective, as Sue mentioned earlier. Where will we be in 5 years? Where will we be from a global perspective? And what does it mean for Canada? What does it mean for particular Atlantic Canada? So I'm interested to hear about your project and future ones.
Thank you, Bruce. And as Sue mentioned already correctly, we play above the 400 tons, let's say, with actually bigger vessels where we feel most comfortable. So first of all, I'm going to mention a few things about the project we're involved. It's public knowledge. It's a project with Atlantic Towing and Energy Research and Innovation, Newfoundland and Labrador. And it's we're hybridizing one of the Atlantic Towing vessels, which operate off the coast of Newfoundland. We're putting a large 1 megawatt hour battery, and with the objective being to reduce fuel consumption, optimize energy usage, and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The project is interesting because it's the first retrofit of that sort in Canada. There are other vessels on the West Coast which operate with batteries already, but this is the first retrofit, and we are trying also to bring that know-how. As Trevor correctly mentioned, our colleagues, for example, we are a Norwegian company, European company. They have a lot of experience over there in Europe, but we are trying to bring that experience over to Canada. And speaking of that, we have to give a lot of credit to Canadian ship owners. Atlantic Towing, we mentioned, Seaspan ferries on the West Coast. There are other STQ, and even there was a recently announced another project with a company in Toronto. Ship owners are actually, Canadian ship owners are looking at options to optimize the energy usage to electrify their vessels. And what we find out is that there is a genuine desire to actually move in that direction. So our project, we are in the midst of it. So I apologize if I don't provide as many specifics as probably people are hoping for, but we also have some limitations. But in essence, we are building a deck house, which will all the batteries, the switchgear, and fire protection, fire detection systems. Everything will be. It's a self-contained. Let's put it simply, metal box. Although it's a bit more complicated than that, as you can imagine, because Trevor mentioned on the regulatory side, it's an interesting topic because being the first, of course, it has its challenges, and we also have to give a lot of credit to Transport Canada, DNV, who are also a major part of that project. So if I can expand on the global electrification, I mean, we have to keep in mind that shipping only contributes globally around 3.5% of the global emissions. So even if we cut 100% of the emissions in shipping, it will still make a small difference. But nevertheless, we have to. Everybody's moving in that direction. There is a lot of, as you know, socio-economic factors, and economic factors. I really want to emphasize on that because we are a commercial company. We're in business, and everything we do, it has to make a business case sense to ship owners, because that's when it actually becomes really easy to convince them. And we're lucky that electrification actually is at that point where we can prove to ship owners, yeah, it makes sense to put an energy storage on your boat. It saves you money. It gives you another degree of freedom. What I mean is time, because energy storage, for example, provides you with the ability to store energy and to use it when the right time comes. You have to use it as it's being produced. So that flexibility is becoming more and more popular among ship operators, ship owners, and yeah, it does help them improve their operations. The other important thing is that electrification, and Trevor mentioned something on that. It's not a universal painkiller. It's not going to solve. It's not a magic pill that will solve all the problems that we have, because all vessels are different. These are large investments, capital investments. They are made for purpose. You don't just build a vessel because you feel like building one. You build it to do a specific job. Like if you take the vessels on the East Coast, the ferries that you in, whether it's Nova Scotia or Newfoundland, they operate certain routes, and they have schedules and all that. So when we talk about hybridizing, electrifying these vessels now today, it becomes a custom-made solution, and this is also important to keep in mind. So these are just some of the. Sorry, I get really excited when I talk about electrification, but I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to give you a chance to continue.
Excellent. Carmen, I think just to put the 1 megawatt hour energy storage system in perspective, so that is a battery that if you wanted to charge it from zero, would cost you, and if you're buying electricity off the grid, it would cost you $170,000 to charge that battery. So that gives you an idea of the size of it. So it's a huge it's a very large thing. I think it's probably one of the largest. I think you also mentioned the experience in Canada. So the idea of what's going on with C-SPAN in British Columbia, I think, is very important, and I think that will inform what else is going on. Sue as well mentioned the idea of decoupling energy production on a vessel with energy use, and how that can be a very useful thing. So I think these are all great comments. I think, Sue, I don't know if do you have a comment to make on what Cameron was saying about energy decoupling, or perhaps other parts of what he had said.
Well, I think his point about building vessels for purpose is really important. It actually came up in a conference I was speaking at last week. I think it was, again, the Caribbean. I was in Trinidad, and one of the people who was on the panel was talking about how in the Caribbean, for example, the vessels that are there are often repurposed from other areas. So they never need to reach certain speeds and certain ability to carry certain loads, but they may have been bought from a vessel that was a transatlantic vessel or something that carried very large loads. So they're not being used for the purposes that they were designed for, and that's where we get the waste, and that's where we start to have really big problems. We need to use the energy that we have smartly, really, is what it comes down to, and we need to start putting a bit more demand on the resources that we have. So when we retrofit a vessel, and we know that maybe it's a ferry and it's only ever going to go X speed, and we know that the boundaries of it say that you should never go out in certain wave height and wind heights and certain classes of sea, that we make sure that we don't overestimate. So my PhD work was actually built on how you estimate the propulsion systems, the sizes of propulsion systems. My particular expertise is scaling data and taking data that you have that you're using to predict what the full scale will be. And we have big challenges with that, because it's hard to scale, and there's a lot of experience that goes into it. But then there's always the estimation piece and the correction factors that we put in. All of those things really impact what we're doing. So it makes it even more important, especially when you're talking about the size of engines and systems that go on these boats. It's even more important to really work on finding ways to design for the purpose. And this multi-purposing of vessels, wanting to have one vessel that can do 15 different things. Well, it's not going to do 15 different things efficiently. Really, and it's the same thing with the fishing boats. We have the fishing boats often have giant engines in them for dumping day, but they only use it one day, right? The rest of the time they keep their speeds down nice and low. So, or some of them like to drive fast, but maybe it's an industry that shouldn't drive fast. Maybe if we actually allocated sites by lottery, or there's another way of allocating the sites, they wouldn't have this race out where that's the day that they have the accidents, and that's why they have the big engines. And then so if you have an engine that's 400 or 600 horsepower, and then the rest of the season you're never going above 200 horsepower, then that's a really inefficient engine. So how we use our resources is really important, and I just wanted to pick up on that with Common, that it's not just ships, it's the whole spectrum of uses of energy. Yeah.
Interesting. Trevor, I heard Common say that Vard is a business that's into making money, like most businesses, and business case has to be good. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how software and monitoring and management of vessels in an electrified environment? What are your thoughts on that? Is there anything that Common said that resonated with you, or that you'd like to sort of add to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sizes of batteries, is a key point. So, 1 megawatt hour battery is a good size battery, but I suspect that Carmen and others are talking about batteries that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 megawatt hours that could be on vessels as well. And even on an inshore fishing boat, you're talking about batteries that are 2, 3, 4, 500 kilowatt hours, so half megawatt hour. So they're sizable batteries, and And unlocking the value of those batteries for multiple stakeholders is not a simple task, and it requires a lot of intelligence and software to do it. So our belief, and you're seeing this happen on land with different different commercial vehicles, different personal automobiles. There's a lot of momentum gathering around the value of those assets when they're hooked into the grid. So the utility can use that battery asset effectively and provide a monetary value for the electricity grid. To do that effectively and to do it without impacting the mission of the vessel operator or owner, so they don't come in the morning to get on the vessel and and go to sea and realize they didn't have enough charge because the utility used too much for their battery last night. That takes a lot of intelligence and takes a lot of data. It takes a lot of working in a multi stakeholder and multi vendor environment to pull those pieces together and unlock that value of the battery. And that applies for inshore boats, that applies for larger vessels as well. And that's really where Remote is building software is to unlock the value of that battery asset, and which ultimately benefits the operator and the owner because it reduces the total cost of ownership of the vessel, and helps reduce the financial burden of the upfront capital cost of going electric. So I think when it comes to software, it's absolutely required, and we've honed in on that space and believe there's a value proposition there that if we stay laser focused on, we can unlock that value and help accelerate the adoption.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. I think my earlier statement about how much it costs to charge a 1 megawatt-hour battery, I think I might have been off by an order of magnitude or two there, but anyway, it's still impressive with the size battery. Common, do you have any final comments to add to this, just in terms of what was said today and from your perspective? I think you have probably we all have a global perspective. I think yours is particularly salient.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, actually, Trevor was spot on. I think we just delivered the vessel to a customer with a 4.4 megawatt-hour battery. So I think that's the largest that we've done up to now. But some interesting feedback from our colleagues all across the world, because Vard is a global company, Fincantieri is a global company. I believe that currently 100% of the vessels that are being built in our shipyards actually have some sort of energy storage, some sort of electrification. And we put the first battery on a boat in 2013, I believe, and it's still going strong. So I think that because a lot of times the question comes up, how long before we actually need to do something? Well, we don't know. We are finding out as we go, because the first one hasn't reached 10 years yet. But up to now, the feedback that we have is it's doing fine. And safety, paramount importance for our business, for the marine business. It's gone a long way as well. I mean, actually, the safety requirements on board are much more stringent than what car makers. Of course, they also have very stringent ones, but there is another level of safety requirements on board. So I would say that battery producers, actually marine battery producers, are doing a pretty good job today. So we just have to keep in mind that software, digital tools, what Trevor was mentioning, the focus is shifting probably from the mechanical heart of the ship, the engine, to much more to the
control,
the power management, how you use the energy, as Sue mentioned, because one thing that future whether carbon neutral or carbon free or fuels, alternative fuels, will have in common is that they will be much more expensive than diesel today, and we cannot afford to waste that energy to send it through the stack out there. We have to make very, very good use of it. So electrification, our perspective is it's only starting now, and I think on the east coast of Canada we have a great potential for a lot of business, and also a lot of opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to save money to owners, because the vessels on the east coast of Canada, ferries, fishing boats, all of these are prime candidates for electrification.
Interesting. Thank you, Carmen. I think we'll close with just drawing the contrast between what Sue said about fishermen who have an engine because they want to have an engine or have a specific requirement, but a lot of times it's just because they want to have a boat with a big engine, versus what Trevor and Carmen were saying about the business case, the value proposition, the total cost of ownership, which is something that I don't think comes necessarily front of mind for a fisherman when they're planning on a boat. So these are all very widely varying drivers, and how we have to change the way we make decisions, business decisions and technology decisions. So Sue, I saw you raise your hand at one point. Did you have a final comment you wanted to make, or?
Oh, I think I was just scratching my head.
Oh, okay. So if we were in a live situation now, it would be very different. But thank you very much for your participation today. And if anyone in the audience would like to contact us, please don't hesitate. You can reach us through coveocean.ca, or you can reach me if you want at bruce.mcdougall, that's MacDougal, at coveocean.com. Not .ca, .com. So there you go. So thank you very much for your participation today.